please visit my website, programtokill.net. Go to plans and prices for even more exclusive information. You can also support me now on Patreon. Add me on TikTok. And leave a like and comment.
They used to put me in a coffin, a small coffin, that was so small on me that I couldn't move my arms. And one of the ways they programmed me not to talk was, told me that I was never to talk, and then they, I knew they were going to put me in the coffin, and they took a hand that had been cut off of a person, and performed sexual acts on me with the hand, and then put the hand on my chest, and put the lid on the coffin. And that's the type of programming that they do. And I saw the sacrifices that I remember the most clearly. One was, and I gave this in public testimony in San Francisco a few months ago, was a young girl. I must have been about 3 or 4, because I can remember looking over the top of what I always thought of as a table, but must have been an altar. And there was a blonde-haired girl who was a little older than me, who was nude, laying on the table, and there were other children and me, and we washed her body. And they gave us water to do it with, and she must have been drugged. I never could think, I thought about it, and I thought, well, now why did she just lay there? But I'm pretty sure that she would have been drugged. And after we washed her, then adults who had masks and robes on took a weapon kind of thing and cut her chest open. And then I don't remember what happened after that until I remember her just being bloody and her arms folded again over her. The woman, she probably was very young in her teenage years, and she gave birth to a baby. And I watched the birth of the baby, and she was nude in the corner when she did this. This all happened, these sacrifices happened in a meat processing plant of some sort. Because the setting was like that. And that all sounded so weird to me, and I was afraid to tell people these things because I thought they will think I'm crazy. But the more I talk, the more encouraged I am that my experiences are not unusual at all. They're shared by lots and lots of people. The types of sacrifices, the types of settings, the types of outfits these people wore, the masks that they wore are similar to other people's experiences. And like I told you earlier when we're talking, they're in my memory. I don't have to check them out or anything. They're in my memory, and when they click in with other information, it frightens me, but then it's also reassuring that I'm not crazy. The other sacrifice, when this woman gave birth to this baby, they sacrificed the baby and the mother, and they did the baby by putting, I don't even know if it was a boy or girl, in a wooden kind of vice thing, and they tightened it and squashed the baby. And then the mother, how they killed her was they hung her by her feet, and she was nude also, and she was laughing the entire time they did this, and they poured something on her face, and then they lit it on fire, and then they cut her in two from in between her legs, and that's how they killed her. And Like I said, you can understand why I wouldn't want to talk about these things. They're very bizarre.
Discovered these children were more frightened than children who have been sexually assaulted, because it seems these children were intimidated a great deal more. They were threatened that if they spoke, their families would be killed or their pets would be killed, and indeed they would be killed. And in what I will call standard molestation cases, it's usually don't tell, your mommy won't like me anymore. If you tell, I won't be able to be your daddy, or don't tell because they won't believe you, and just, it was kind of minimal threats. It wasn't, if you do, I'll come and burn your house down. And these children had extreme threats. Well, even before murdering children, they will describe having to endure being defecated upon and urinated upon and having to eat and ingest those things. That's something they have a very hard time describing. Then they'll describe killing of children, and the last thing they describe is the eating of babies. They have a very hard time with that one, or drinking the blood of the babies, or drinking the blood of animals that were slain. That they're ingesting parts or human parts is the last thing they'll tell you.
Is that something that you heard from different children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And these children were connected in the same case?
Yeah, I hear that from other children, and I've heard that not only from this case, but other cases. I've talked to other children in other cases, and they've also talked about it. One boy described being forced to ingest a male dog's penis, and that made him, as he puts it, he says barf, which is our slang term for throwing up or vomiting. He said it made him barf. So in my office, I have masks, which are used for play therapy because you could dress up and pretend you're somebody strong and brave. And the one child said this person wore a red face. So on a kind of like a whim, I said, would it be this? And I showed him a mask of the Spider-Man face.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It's a little worn out. But anyway, it's a cartoon character here in America. It's called Spider-Man. And so the child looked at that and he sort of looked at it carefully. He said, no, it's not that face. No. So I said, I happen to have this old mask, which was from Halloween here. That and his whole face changed. It just went completely blank, and he was like in a trance. And he said, yes, that's the face that the man wore when he hurt me, when he tied me up and hurt me.
Teenagers he was playing with took him down into a canyon, a wooded canyon by our house. And there was a man there with a devil's mask on that he said was his uncle, my sister's husband. And they took all his clothes off and tied him to a tree and urinated on him and stuck things in his anus, he said. And he gets real upset if you try to talk to him about it.
Do you have an idea what happened that he got so scared?
I think they threatened him that they would kill us. They would kill his brother. They stabbed our cat with a dart to, prove that they would hurt something.
Because she sexually acts stuff out at home sometimes, and she used to hide in a little closet a lot. Hunting all over the house for her, and she'd have a baby doll in her hand, and she said, I'm saving the baby. She'd always try to save the baby at first. She woke up one morning and said, Mommy, Tessie's dead. And I said, who is Tessie? She said, that they killed the baby. And I said, what do you mean, a baby puppy? And she said, no. And I said, a baby kitty? She said, no. Girl. She said they stabbed the baby, they dug a hole with a shovel, they put the baby in it, they put dirt over the hole and patted the hole with a shovel.
So I asked all these questions to the various adults who'd been in these covens, and they said those were the same tactics used. the marriages, the ceremonies, the blood poured over the heads, the sacrificial humans and animals and birds. So they corroborated everything the children were saying. And it was a very brave thing for the adult survivors to talk, because they were involved in the murders. Some of the adult survivors were involved in kidnapping, because if they didn't kidnap a child for a ritual ceremony, their child would be used in the ceremony. You know, in this country, we have a lot of child kidnapping going on. I just don't know how many of that is, what if that might be just one parent trying to get a child back that they don't have custody of, or whether it happens to be a child that's used in this manner. But at any rate, I've talked to adult survivors who actually had to recruit teenagers to become Satanists, or had to kidnap children to bring them to the next high Satanic holy holiday so they could be used as victims.
There has been several daycare center incidents throughout the United States that involve sexual child molest and also ritual, satanic rituals. The evidence that was found was more medical evidence of the actual sexual assault. But again, the other evidence, of the drinking of blood and urine and that kind of stuff, there's no evidence for that. We're just, from what we gather from the kids, they're all telling us, yeah, that we did this. We killed a cat or we killed a dog. We had to drink this blood, or whatever. And the little kids are telling us this stuff. And kids in California are saying the same thing that kids in New York are saying. And, the same thing that kids in Omaha are saying. It's just, the little guys are all saying the same thing. So it's, nothing that they're not coming up with this off the top of their head. I believe this actually happened, because there's no way a little guy, 3 or 4 would know this kind of stuff. But it's just, there again, the evidence. It's just, we don't have any evidence to prove that.
They honestly believe that Satan will come and rule the world, and that they will be among the elite. And in order to be among the elite, they have to perform certain acts and rituals and ceremonies that keep them in good stead with Satan. And this particular satanic cult, that included sacrifice. And the younger the infant was sacrificed, the more power they believed they possessed, because that child was pure and had not sinned, and therefore there was more power gained. It's hard to imagine there are people so sick as to believe by taking a human life you would gain some kind of power. But literally that was their belief. Those kind of things that are being heard from children aren't unusual. And I think probably the thing that's most frightening is that we don't want to believe this exists. I didn't want to believe that what I was remembering could possibly have happened. It would have been much easier for me to believe that I was crazy, or that I had a very sick imagination and was imagining all this, and that the memories coming back weren't real. On the same hand, we have professional therapists who are not trained in schools to identify this or to believe that these horrendous acts can happen. 20 years ago, we did not want to believe that incest occurred. We did not want to believe that there would be any parent who would deliberately sexually abuse their own child. And yet, 20 years later, here and now, we know that's true. We're at the threshold of just learning what satanic ritualistic abuse really is about, how prevalent it is, how networked it is, not just in the United States and Canada, but in every country in the world, because their whole premise is world dominance. And that means that you cannot leave any country untouched. So no matter what country you're from, somewhere in the most secret, highly protected societies, there is going to be some satanic ritualistic abuse. And those who manage to survive it and to escape it, and who the walls break down for and the memories start coming back, there better be therapists in place who can hear it and understand it and believe it and accept it, or those people will never get help.
The nature of this phenomenon seems to be that people who are doing it are much too smart, much too well hidden, and much too aware of crowd process to risk being caught. They will take public concern and skepticism and turn it against the children, and turn it against those people who are trying to define the problem, so that the public itself becomes the enemy of discovery. Children in what we call ritual abuse cases describe being taken places where their parents don't know they are, being drugged with injections, sometimes installations of something into the rectum, sometimes into their eyes, being forced to play games, using children's games in ways that become perverted with sexual perversity or with confinement, being tied and bound down, sometimes put in boxes or held in what they describe as coffins, being forced to have sex, penetrating, sometimes cruel and hurtful sexual experience with one another and with other adults, and forced to watch on while adults participate in sadistic and sexual acts, involving children who are threatened with the use of weapons, threatened that they'll be killed, with guns and knives brandished, and statements made that their parents will be killed if the children speak of such a thing. And again, this threat of murder is reinforced by the killing of animals, with the children forced to participate in killing the animals and taking the responsibility, having the guilty secret of having killed. And in many of these cases, the children further describe participating in the killing of human beings, of babies in some cases, sometimes adults. There seems to be a ritual quality of that, where the individual victims are cut and bled, and often the blood is consumed, sometimes the flesh is consumed. These horrific kinds of impossible acts are described by many children in many places with no apparent connection with one another, and yet they have such a perfect correlation. They match so well.
Opmerkelijk genoeg komen die elementen ook terug in de verhalen van slachtoffers in Nederland. Zo was er een zaak in Amsterdam. Een meisje werd op een basisschool seksueel misbruikt en ritueel mishandeld.
Ze vertelde dat ze vastgebonden moest liggen op een tafel. En dat de hoofdonderwijzeres er dan onder de voeten kietelde. En die stageloper waar mijn man het over had, haar seksuele gemeenschap met haar had. Ze vertelde ook dat daar kindertjes waren. En dan vertelde ze, mama, daar wordt ingestoken in die kindertjes. Babytjes had ze het over. En ik zei, maar zijn het misschien poppen waar je het over hebt? Nee mama, want ze steken erin en er komt bloed uit. En dan vertelde ze ook een keer van een kindje, dat werd tussen 2 platen geperst, een babytje. En daar zei ze, dat werd zo tegen elkaar aangedrukt, vastgeschroefd of zo. En daar spatte het bloed uit. En ook had ze het over dat ze zelf in een bak bloed moest zitten. En dan werd ze dus met bloed besprenkeld. En op een gegeven moment zei ze, ja mam, ik moest daar een stuk hamstervlees eten. Daar had ze het ook nog over. En dat ze dan moest beraken, maar dat ze het toch op moest eten. Speciaal zei ze, het ziet grijs en het stinkt zo en ik moest ervan overgeven.
There are 2 reasons, essentially, why people don't remember. The first is they're given a warning that they're going to die. And if you're a child of 5 years old and you see another child of 5 literally burned up and told the same thing would happen to you if you ever talked about the experience, that's usually warning enough to keep you quiet. The other thing that happens is there may be very professional medical or psychiatric people involved who will utilize some combination of drugs and hypnosis, one or the other or both. And that combination may require a person to be unable to remember. They literally can't remember because they're told that their mind won't work. People will think they're crazy. They'll have confusion inside. They may remember the effects of the drugs.
As the children who disclosed sexual abuse entered into therapy or continued in conversations with their parents, and only after some time, these children began describing ritual abuse, the presence of other people doing sadistic and sometimes religiously significant kinds of rituals. They described the worship of Satan. They described messages in which they were told that their parents were bad and that society was weak and that Satan was strong. These indications of satanic activity only emerged long after the original acknowledgments of sexual activity.
You have to realize that in the satanic beliefs in religion, they honestly believe that Satan will come and rule the world and that they will be among the elite. And in order to be among the elite, they have to perform certain acts and rituals and ceremonies that keep them in good stead with Satan. In this particular satanic cult, that included sacrifice. And the younger the infant that was sacrificed, the more power they believed they possessed, because that child was pure and had not sinned, and therefore there was more power gained. It's hard to imagine there are people so sick as to believe by taking a human life you would gain some kind of power. But literally, that was their belief.
Generally speaking, I would say they would tend to be the better educated, more professional people. You may have a lot of people that are not particularly high on the socioeconomic level who participate, but the people who run those groups, who lead them, are the people that I call professionals. The professionals may be attorneys, physicians, psychiatrists, ministers, political figures, well-to-do business figures, and anybody that has status and power in the community. These people feel that their sense of power comes from social status and economic means. The way they deal with their world of victimization is by controlling it, and they will control it through the material means and through the political power or any power that they can manage.
I would say yes. The groups are well organized, and they don't want to be found out. They don't want to be caught. And the different things that they use are very sacred to them. The knives and candles and whatnot, and the bones that they use, and they will use them again and again and again. And that's one reason why they take everything with them. Yeah, I would say they would be very well organized.
Wat overblijft zijn onopgeloste zaken. Geen daders en geen bewijzen. Er zijn alleen gruwelijke en bizarre verhalen van slachtoffers die zo sterk op elkaar lijken dat het geen toeval kan zijn. Als er één onopgeloste zaak in Nederland is waar dat voor geldt, is het Oude Pekela. Ook daar hoorden ouders hele vreemde verhalen van hun kinderen.
Ze kwamen bij een huis, een groot wit huis, met een zwembad. Er waren vrij veel mensen verkleed, als clowns, als dieren ook, als tijgers, krokodillen waren er. Daar werden ze gedoucht, uitgekleed, ingezeept, gedoucht, want ja, de kinderen werden zo van straat geplukt, dus ze waren nogal zwart. En dat konden ze niet gebruiken, zulke zwarte kinderen voor een film, want het waren allemaal lampen, wat dat betreft. En ja, dan werden daar spelletjes gedaan. Seksuele handelingen moesten de kinderen verrichten met mensen die, grote mensen met een dikke piemel. Waar ze dan aan moesten likken. Er werd over hun heen geplaatst. Ze moesten poep uit mensen trekken. Ja. Ze moesten met elkaar ook dingen doen, moesten elkaar stokjes in aansteken, moesten op grote vrouw, op een volwassen vrouw gaan liggen.
De verhalen van de kinderen in Oude Pekela over de clowns, de verkleedpartijen, de seksspelletjes en de films kon niemand plaatsen. Maar in Amerika herkennen ze het.
I'm amazed to hear that children describe costuming with the same kind of specificity as we have heard here. It's very hard to understand the meaning. Children in our cases describe being involved with jungle animals, as if they are riding on elephants and lions and tigers, and we believe this probably represents costumes. They describe grown-ups being dressed in costumes of clowns or popular cartoon figures, sometimes in the robes of a devil, or very often describing numbers of people dressed in black hooded robes, involved in circular movements and chants.
Maanden nadat de kinderen van Oude Pekela de clowns en de andere dingen hadden beschreven, kwamen ze met nog meer. Die verhalen waren zo gruwelijk, zo bizar en ongelooflijk, dat ouders daar niet mee naar buiten durfden komen, omdat ze toch al niet werden geloofd. Een enkele ouder durft dat anoniem, nu wel.
Ja, dat was zeker een 3/4 jaar later. Waarbij het jongste kind aangaf dat er meer dingen waren. Ik zou op een gegeven moment zijn rolschaats aan doen. En toen had hij het ineens over een hondje. Wat werd doodgemaakt. En waar het hele hoofd eraf was. Ik wilde daar natuurlijk wel iets meer van weten, maar hij klapte helemaal dicht. Toen heb ik toen een ander kind gevraagd, s'avonds, toen ik hem naar bed bracht. Zei ik, nou, luister eens, die broertje die heeft het over een hondje waarbij ze het hoofd af hebben gesneden. Waarop hij dat dus ook bevestigt en zegt, ja, dat hondje dat stond vastgebonden. Daar moesten wij met messen, stokken met messen, moesten wij in dat hondje steken. Het hondje dat blafte, want ja, natuurlijk waren we naar huis. Maar het was niet alleen een hondje, er waren veel meer dingen bij. En dan begint hij voor ons, ja, eigenlijk niet te geloven, maar dan begint hij over mensen ook. Over kinderen. Een kindje wat is misgegroeid. Wat eigenlijk loopt of kruipt op zijn armpjes. Wat een misvormd gezichtje heeft, wat heel moeilijk spreekt. Ja, wat eigenlijk een heel andere taal gebruikt. Chinees heeft hij het over. Het is ook een bruin kindje met krulletjes. En dat kindje dat wordt op een gegeven moment op een stoeltje gezet. Er komt een geel kruis op het buikje van het kindje. Het is bloot, helemaal naakt. Onze kinderen die hebben witte pakjes aan. En dan mijn zoon noemt dan bloed verzamelen. En dat vond ik eigenlijk zo griezelig ook, hè, met bloed verzamelen. Maar in ieder geval, het meisje dat is dan vastgebonden. En dan wordt het geslagen door volwassenen. Het wordt geslagen in het gezicht. Een bloedlip. De lip wordt geslagen, een bloedneus. En het kind het huilt. En dan komt er een grote pleister op die mond. Want dat geluid moet niet hoorbaar zijn. En dan wordt het... Dan moeten de andere kinderen ook slaan met stokken. Ze moeten het kindje ook steken. Ja, met messen, een zakmes heeft hij dan. Het wordt geslagen, geschopt. En dan wordt het meisje opengesneden op het kruis. Vertelt hij ook heel duidelijk dan moeten ze met een ijzeren handschoen uit het kind hartjes halen. Het hartje wordt dan in een schatkistje, zo noemt hij het ook, een schatkistje. Daar moeten ze het hartje in doen, dat wordt begraven. En ook het kindje wordt verbrand en begraven. Net als die dieren die er dus bij kwamen. Het is niet alleen één hond en één kindje, één meisje, maar er waren paardjes, er waren een opa en een oma met een hondje. Die dus ook zijn vermoord. Het is eigenlijk zo ongelooflijk is dat je denkt, nou, dat moet een fantasieverhaal zijn. Dat geloof je eigenlijk niet. Dat is zo bizar, dat geloof je niet.
Dit verhaal klinkt ongelooflijk. Maar kinderen uit Manhattan Beach bij Los Angeles vertellen precies hetzelfde als de kinderen in Oude Pekela. In Amerika zijn er al meer identieke zaken bekend. Voor Amerikaanse hulpverleners is het nieuw dat nu ook in Europa zo'nzelfde zaak blijkt te bestaan.
I'm astounded to hear that the case in Holland is identical to cases we have in this country. Identical, I mean that the otherwise bizarre things that children describe, which we would all like to hope could not happen to children anywhere, have been described in detail by children in Holland and by children in Manhattan Beach in the United States and 50 or 60 other places throughout the United States, at least that we know of.
The groups are pretty autonomous, but very familiar with one another, and I'm sure that's true internationally. If I'm looking for a group in California or in Western Europe or any place, I'll simply ask the people in my group who have connections, and they'll be able to direct me. So it's not very hard to find other groups. They may not get together in kind of international conventions, but they will know of one another's existence, and local groups may get together.
There are a couple of issues in these ritual abuse cases that divide people, lead them to fight against belief. One is the description of pornography, where children describe being photographed in sexual and in kinds of situations. And people investigating expect them to find the pictures so that they'll have the truth. When the pictures aren't found, and somehow routinely the pictures are hidden or lost, when people do not find the pictures, they are likely to discredit everything else the children say because of their disappointment and anger at being led to expect physical evidence that isn't there. The same kind of argument is even stronger when the children describe being involved in murder, because then people demand that there be missing people and they demand that there be bodies, and there's no direct correlation with either of those. So the children are punished. The children are blamed for lying when the truth doesn't emerge.
Ook in de Amsterdamse zaak ontkent de politie iets af te weten van rituele slachtingen. Toch is de politie wel op de hoogte. De ouders hebben daarvan de schriftelijke bewijzen in handen. Dat deze zaken niet serieus worden genomen of nauwelijks worden onderzocht, lijkt in Nederland de standaardreactie van politie en justitie. In Amerika reageren de autoriteiten net zo. Hulpverleners daar pleiten ervoor die fout in Nederland niet meer te maken.
My advice to those of you in Europe who have the dreadful opportunity to look at these cases for the first time is to try and profit from our mistakes. These are not cases which will be satisfactory to criminal tests of guilt. Your first goal should not be to figure out who you're going to put in jail or who is going to be arrested for these crimes. People will fight over that and destroy any understanding of what might be happening to the children. I would hope that there's someone in Holland who will take charge of finding out what happened to the children and learning why. And only then, after validating that such things really do happen, and that there are people who have the knowledge and power to brainwash children into silence and terror, that only then will people use that intelligence to try and figure out how this can be stopped and who can be held responsible. The nature of this phenomenon seems to be that people who are doing it are much too smart, much too well hidden, and much too aware of crowd process to risk being caught. That they will take public concern and skepticism and turn it against the children, and turn it against those people who are trying to define the problem, so that the public itself becomes the enemy of discovery?
I think at first we need to educate in our own countries. We need to educate the politicians, the judges, the policemen particularly. Once we've done that, we need to move across and deal with it on an international level, probably at the United Nations. But we must be at least 10 years away from that. We still have 5 years' work to do in this country before it's properly believed.